So could coronavirus, in fact, be the thing that saves the high street? Here to talk to us about it is Kate Hardcastle, MBE, retail expert. Hi, Kate.
Hello.
So we're seeing mass panic buying in shops, huge queues of people outside stores this morning. Weirdly, could this thing, which is devastating so many other industries, be the thing that really saves retail?
Well, I think it will certainly get everyone to take a new look at retail in the weeks, months and years to come, because we're all going to live life so differently. I think in the short term, and speaking to delivery companies and some of the retailers right now, if you just move away from grocery for a minute, there's a peak in sales on things like technology products. Yep. Streaming products, all this makes sense, doesn't it? Exercise equipment for home,
DIY. All of us thinking we're going to get fit, yeah.
Right, wallpaper, wheelbarrows for gardening. So it looks like people are thinking, actually, I've got my head around things now, I'm going to use this time at home well. So that's the peak right now aside of grocery. In the longer term, I mean, could we hopefully start to use independent, smaller businesses, realise the importance of community? Might we even move more to the experience peak that we were doing prior to this, where people buy more experiences over the material goods? So much could change, but what I know is retail does change, and it's changing forever as it was before this happened. So it's fast moving because of digital, and it's going to be really interesting to see how the different brands react.
One of the things I've noticed is actually smaller independent companies really stepping up and taking up some of the slack. So I've seen lots of kind of wholesale food, wholesale vegetable and fruit sellers actually saying, do you know what, we'll do our own delivery boxes. We won't rely on sending it to Ocado or Tesco. We'll create our own brand and we'll do our own box. Do you think things like that might make us start potentially going to smaller, more independent shops? And do you think it'll change how they work as well?
So I think I've got to touch on the panic buying a little bit here, because panic buying is an emotional thing. It's psychologically the public trying to get some control over a situation they can't feel in control of. And what we're trying to do is ask people to stop sharing the barren shelves and the trolley queues on social media, which then perpetuates the panic buying. But what we're pushing people to do is say, look, and I think more work could be done to signpost in the next few weeks, use the local services. They are now stepping up. The thing is, when you're an entrepreneur, you don't have the red tape of these big businesses, and you have to make money, you are going to be as inventive as you possibly can be. And I'm delighted not only to see those smaller businesses saying, how do I evolve my business, but also, how do I support my local community too? Because a lot of them, Harriet, proportionate of their size, are giving a lot more back than some of the bigger retailers.
Absolutely. What I've seen from lots of small retailers, they're amazing offers for consumers, but also amazing offers in terms of actually buy this, we'll give a free one to the NHS, all those sorts of things. I think that's amazing. One of the things that I am interested in, Kate, is you talked about this panic buying. We saw at the coronavirus briefing today, the Secretary of State for Food and Environment saying, don't panic. It's fine. There's nothing to panic about here. There is lots of food. There is no problem. The UK has loads of food. We are fine. Yeah, when I went into my local Sainsbury's, I think I went to a local Sainsbury's, local Tesco this morning, there were empty shelves. And and I sort of found myself reaching for a loaf of bread and then being like, oh no, I don't need that loaf of bread. But there are only 2 on the shelf, so I thought maybe I should take one just in case. What is going on? Why, if there is so much food, is it not on the shelves right now?
It's £1 billion of the food we've consumed into our homes, which is in excess of Christmas time, which is normally our peak in the food calendar. You've perfectly articulated what's going on, because even those who try and take a calmer view in it, even those who have said, no, I'm not going to react to it, then go and find the situation for themselves and think, I've let my family down, this isn't good enough, I've tried to ignore this and now we've ended up without. And worst of all affected are the NHS workers, the people who are key workers, and we critically need them. If we don't let our NHS workers be fed and fed easily, how can we hope to depend on them in the weeks to come? So we've done some work, and the government and supermarkets have done they've done an amount towards trying to release the fear and try and make people realise that there's a Feed the Nation campaign. It's a tiered strategy in terms of all the different levels and what we'll start to see and how our supermarkets will change. But I think more programs like this, where you're being very conversational about it rather than just talking about the headlines, are probably going to help reassure people. Because the thing is, all those thousands of jobs you've seen advertised in the supermarket industry of late, they're going to help stock the shelves again. The legislation that's changed this week with emergency force is going to see more cooperation between the big supermarkets working together. So you'll see more delivery drivers and shared delivery resources out there. And what I'm hoping, things like online deliveries, they might be able to just tell the public where the first available delivery slot is, or where the easiest click and collect is, together as a combined force. So I think you will start to see a change, because the stock will become available because of all the workers, all the changes. People will see the reassurance of it, and they will go, right, okay, I don't have to do that. But if they don't, and if it doesn't change in time, you might start to see even more restrictive measures when you go into those stores.
Do you think the superstores are doing the right thing in saying, actually, we can only have 2 packets of bread or 2 pints of milk, by setting limits on what shoppers can buy?
Yes, I do. I do, because they have to control it in the immediate way they can, and they can't get the stock on the shelves quickly enough. And there's lots of things that stand in their way. It's easy to view an organisation and say, well, you need to do this, this and this, but when you're very large, that takes time. And no one will fly the independent flag greater than me, by the way, so I'm not trying to be wholly on the side of the big boys here. But, you know, I think we've got to understand that whilst those things happen, they have to put procedures in place which will involve quantity reduction of certain key items. Then we might start to see changing in operating hours, which we're starting to see, so that when they open, they're open fully with as much stock as possible, and actually, hopefully, more and more different time allocations for our NHS workers and all the people at separate times, I hope. And then we might start to see a complete reduction in the amount of brands that we're used to. Think about 24/7 shopping and tens of thousands of brands in there. We don't need all that, so that they can focus on the absolute essentials. You might even get to a point, depending on how much we continue to panic buy, where you are right, you may buy a box of this, and this box will contain all the things you need as a family for a weekly amount of food.
Oh, interesting. So you think they'll kind of start saying, actually, these are the basics, here you go, 1 per family?
If it continues that we continue to panic buy, we don't heed the warnings, they can't do enough to restrict the amount of people in shops. I mean, all kinds of things are suggested, like why we're letting people still go around with trolleys, and unless you're elderly or you maybe have a disability and you need a trolley as part of it, why don't we just limit people to an overall set amount so that we're just doing regular top-up shops? Why don't we let so many people in the shop at one at a time? But these things take time to police and put in. So it might come to the fact that if they still can't get the stock on the shelves, then we might see even more restrictive measures to make sure that fairly it's distributed. And I think if we think about it, you know, if we have to give up a bit of balsamic or whatever luxury ingredients it is that those workers get, tea, food, milk, I'm all for it. It shouldn't come to that, Harriet. There are massive things happening behind the scenes.
One of the big kind of, I guess, retail news today was John Lewis announcing it's closing its stores temporarily. What impact is that going to have on its staff, and I guess also on the kind of morale for the British High Street? Because I feel like John Lewis is a bit of a British institution. I
think there is going to be a big hit with brands that don't have those demand products we were talking about, and particularly the fashion type brands.
Yeah.
When you can't go into a store and peruse, and we've covered this for nearly 15 years now because of the rise of online, you are more controlled with your purchasing. You don't tend to, see something I didn't expect to buy, those pick up on the spot purchases. It's a very different method of shopping. And therefore, that's going to mean if there isn't the emotional quick buy-in and we're buying what we need and we're trying to be a little bit more careful with our money because we don't know what's going to happen ahead, those retailers are all going through challenging times anyway, are going to have a big hit. Now, there's lots of measures the government have announced, but is it going to perhaps just change our whole philosophy about what we need and consumption and buy? Quite possibly, just like the big environmental change that we were seeing before this virus sort of overtook everyone's main attention. I think it could change things forever.
Do you think it's going to change how we socialise? Because I sort of agree with you, which is it's definitely going to change our behaviour patterns, but I wonder if it's going to change them forever, or if if when the moment comes where suddenly we can go back to shopping normally, we're all so excited about being able to go to the shops. So we're just there the whole time. And I also thought that about restaurants, because we've seen, McDonald's have announced they're still going to do drive-through. I'm seeing lots of restaurants switching to being takeaways. How are they going to survive, do you think?
Well, I think there's a few questions there. I don't think, as much as I'm not someone in the medical profession, that there's going to be a day released where we all go, it's back to normal now, and we all run out and party and use the pubs and the clubs and things again. It's going to have to be phased, isn't it? So I was speaking to someone who owns a chain of hairdressers tonight, and they're trying to look really far in the future. They're a small business and saying, right, okay, even when we can open back up, we're going to have distancing measures and procedures in place, which means that we won't be able to take on that wealth of people that will want to run back and get their routes done. So how do we start to plan and manage what that might look like? Yeah. So I think it's going to be phased. And because it's phased, sure, there'll be the shopaholics amongst us who just can't wait to get their feet back into the halo ground of Selfridges. But, I think actually some of us are going to spend more time with our family because we've not seen them and loved ones, and we're going to want to cherish moments more. We're going to have a better appreciation of life and things. And I think whilst you might not have everyone who behaves that way, we look for the tipping point, don't we? What we're looking for is where is most people going? And I think there will be a greater appreciation of family, people, health than material goods. Now, I'm in the retail industry and travel industry, so I want there to be people running back to those floors to feed my children. But at the same time, I think it might have to be business done in a different way rather than no business at all. I think at the beginning, if you're a brand right now, after the initial panic, hurt, finances, how do you keep your staff on? I guess I'd be working out how I was going to communicate for a customer of the future and working out what that looked like.
Yeah, amazing. Kate, thank you so much for joining us. Kate Hardcastle, MBE retail expert there.